Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Lawyers of Reddit, what are some of the most hilarious / absurd / ridiculous things you've seen in someone's will? Had a guy be extremely charitable when we were drafting his will. $1 million to his church, $2 million to a local hospital, another $2 million to the American Heart Association. When we gave him a quote on how much it cost to draft the will, it wasn't much because it was a rather straightforward document. He asked for a payment plan. He couldn't afford the will. Dude had no money. He thought you could just leave money to people / organizations and the government would foot the bill. He was also the sort that became visibly angry talking about welfare and government handouts, which made his thinking even funnier to me. A good friend of mine looked after this old lady. She was his neighbor and as far as he knew, she had no family. So every day he was at her place when he wasn't working. I met her a few times. Sweet old lady. She had 3 cats that were her babies. Spoiled them to no end. Had a cat room for them with 3 separate beds and 3 separate litter boxes, bowls, etc. Well, one day after looking after her for a few years, he walks in to find she passed in her sleep. Later he finds she named him in her will. He gets to the reading to find 3 20-some ladies there too. Finds out they are the lady's daughters. Turns out the lady had moved across the country unannounced a few years earlier and disappeared from the daughter's life. The old woman left my buddy $19 million. She left the cats to a lifelong friend from her home state, donated all her belongings to Salvation Army, left her daughters each a single litter box and all of its contents, along with a single $20 bill to give them a last taste of all she was to them. Sweet old lady is my hero. I remember reading about a fellow who wrote, "And to person X I leave 50 cents with which he should buy a good stout rope to hang himself with and thus rid the world of his wretched existence." Guys, this was a long time ago. Yes, a rope today costs more than 50 cents. I know. My professor just said that he had someone in the early 80s that left his 3 sons and grandsons his extensive baseball card collection. It seemed normal when my professor first heard of it, but then he was handed a handwritten chart that had several hundred cards listed with the name of the recipient and why that person was getting the card. I leave this picture to Bobby because Bobby can't throw worth a D. Did a few pro bono wills up on the reservation. The big guy asks me to give everything back to the tribe because he has no living immediate family. No problem. Then he has one exception, his Vietnam-era motorcycle. Said it was the first thing he bought after getting home. Wants to be buried with it. I should clarify, not with it, literally on it and in riding position. I helped him set aside the funds necessary to do it and have a lot prepaid for. Dude was awesome. Obligatory not a lawyer, but I heard this story from a woman who used to work at a funeral parlor. Apparently, there was this rich old broad, Rob, from here on out, and her family had been waiting for her to die for a bunch of years so they could get her money. Real stuck-up people, and Rob hated them. But I guess she either didn't have anyone else to leave her money to, or she figured that her awful family would contest the will if everything wasn't left to them. Knowing how status conscious these relatives are, Rob decided, fine, they can have the stupid money, but I'm gonna make them suffer for it. So, when Rob finally passes away, her lawyer approaches the family with her instructions for how her funeral is to be run. According to Rob's will, the only way they get the money is if they follow these instructions to the letter. I don't remember all the absurd details in her instructions, been a few years since I heard the story, except for the pièce de résistance. Rob required an open casket funeral with all family members in attendance and demanded that her corpse be dressed up like Bozo the Clown. Makeup, red nose, crazy hair, massive shoes, the works. The family tried to protest, but Rob's lawyer had tied this thing up beautifully, perfectly ironclad. They either attended the Bozo the Clown funeral, or they don't get a dime. So they did it. These stuck-up a-holes had to stand there for hours, glowering, taking weird looks from all their friends and neighbors as people got close to the casket and realized Rob was dressed like an effing clown. According to the funeral parlor employee who had dressed Rob and applied the makeup, the best part of the service came when they tried to shut the casket and couldn't, because the massive shoes got in the way. They had to bend these 24-inch shoes in half to get the lid closed. I never had the honor of meeting the brilliant cantankerous old bee, but she's one of my biggest GD heroes. A client had 2 sons. He left a whole bunch of specific distributions to one of the sons, his truck, gun collection, etc. To the other son, he specifically left one thing, a poster of himself in high school. No idea if there was some significant/sentimental value behind the poster, or if it was more of a, look what I'm giving your brother, and here's your poster of me so you will never forget that I loved you less. Not a lawyer, but read about a New York heiress who died in her 90s and named her 2 grandchildren in her will, meaning they showed up for the reading. Actually, what was written in her will was, and to my grandchildren X and Y, I leave nothing for reasons that are known to them. For reasons that are known to them. Ice cold. Not a lawyer, but my significant other's father was, and he always said his favorite story was of this old money lady he knew of. She was worth around $15 million and had 5 kids, one of whom married a horrible man who would spout just the foulest effing S against anyone that wasn't a white, rich, able-bodied Christian male. When she died, each child got $3 million, except for the P-baby's wife. She donated that money to things like HBCU's Planned Parenthood, the Special Olympics, her local synagogue, food banks, etc., because you both deserve to die penniless and hating each other for being awful human beings. Filthy Rich Man was the owner of 2 pet ferrets at the time of his death. He effing loved these ferrets and wanted to ensure that these ferrets were taken care of when he passed, so informed his sons that the ferrets were to receive all of his property. My mom only works for crazy rich people. The worst will she ever told me about was this old guy who was close to 90. He wanted it so that when he dies, all of his millions will go into a trust for his kids and his kids will never be able to touch it, but they can collect the interest it generates. So he had my mom set him up with this group of accountants who will manage the trust, and he specifically arranged a plan with them to manage the account in such a way that their yearly billing will almost exactly match the interest to be made. So when he dies, his kids will inherit millions, but will only be able to spend like $35 a year from it. $35 that the kids have to split between them. Not a lawyer, but my mom had her will updated to say that if me or my brother announce her death on Facebook, then we are out of it. It sounds kind of harsh, but me and my brother think it is hilarious. She did it because she doesn't give an S about Facebook, but all her friends do, and they keep pestering her to get one, and she thinks it's tacky to announce a death on there. My grandpa originally had just 2 grandkids, my brother, 17, and I, 22. He has a collection of nice cars. Originally, I was getting his 2 Corvettes, and my brother was getting his Cadillac and a race car. Well, my aunt and uncle finally coughed up some kids, and my mom is about to have another baby, so now there's 8 grandkids. He's announced that he will be having a contest for the cars. The contest is to make him an apple pie that tastes just like his mother's. Not a lawyer, but have done plenty of internship/vacation schemes. Favorite has to be woman who had fallen out massively with her daughter because she hated the husband that the daughter had chosen. This feud went on for years to the point where they never had any contact, and whenever they did, things would get pretty ugly, with the daughter refusing to leave the husband and the mother demanding that she did. So when the time came to read the will, it turned out that the mother had left a good portion of the money to the daughter, 10 to 20% of the sizable estate. There were 3 or 4 children, on the sole condition that the daughter change her surname and her children's surname back to her maiden name, effectively removing this hated husband's name/significance on their family tree. By the sounds of it, this was a real sticking point for the daughter, and I was at the law firm whilst this whole saga was going on. The solicitors were pretty confident that the daughter was going to forsake her inheritance, which was a pretty large one, in order to keep her husband's name. Not a lawyer, but my grandmother left my father out of her will, and by extension, me and my sister. She always been an angry person. Her only form of affection is buying people things. When it comes to interactions with the family, it's been nothing but insults and negativity. We're all stupid, we're all worthless, why can't we be more like such and such as kids, and so on. My father moved our family across the country, and one of the biggest reasons was to be closer to her. We visit her all the time, call her all the time, and then several months ago, my grandmother told my father that he's cut out of her will and that she's already started transferring her assets to his brother. She supposedly had a lot of things to say about my dad, my stepmom, me, and my sister, about how we don't care about her, and that we're so bad to her. Ever since then, we hardly even speak to her. This looks bad, you know. If you tell someone, no, I don't speak to my 90-year-old grandmother anymore, the one who has always bought me gifts, that sounds awful, doesn't it? I think she did that on purpose, I really do, because why else would she even say anything? She had no obligation to tell anyone, she wanted to cause problems. Now my father is the bad son, and now my sister and I are the ungrateful grandchildren. Not only that, but my uncle, the one who is going to receive her assets, is such a coward that he hasn't even spoken to us either. Doesn't answer calls, nothing. We don't see our aunt, we don't get to see our cousins anymore. It's a shame. Everything was fine until she decided to break up the family. So my dad just died. He left me, his only child, an old car worth about $1,000. We were close and I spoke to him at least every fortnight and drove the 3 hours to see him as often as I could. He was difficult, paranoid, and suspicious. I was patient, loving, and as helpful as I could be. He left his entire property to a charity. In going through all the paperwork and trying to find out why, I've worked out the timing of when he changed it and realized that he changed it after my wedding because I had my mother, who raised me and paid for the wedding, sign the wedding certificate instead of him. I hadn't even known he wanted to. He never asked. He mentioned it months later and I apologized and said I would have been happy to let him do that if I'd known he wanted to. He said, but fathers are supposed to sign the wedding certificate. If I didn't sign it, you must not believe I am your father. I have no idea where he got that idea from. I explained that it could be any witness and isn't something fathers traditionally do. I thought he understood. Apparently not. Apparently, he was still so put out that he took me out of his will. Over something so petty and after everything I did for him. I should be mourning his death and missing my father, but instead I'm furious and raging. It's not about the money. It feels like a massive final slap in the face. My since passed aunt and uncle wrote up a will right before my uncle died. I was about 3 at the time and maybe meet my uncle a handful of times. Fast forward 15 years, my aunt passes with the same will and half my family goes to settle all the affairs. Weeks later, I overhear my mom on the phone talking about the will. It was set up that I get 50% of all assets plus the house and any cars, while everyone else, 8 or 9 people, got the other 50%. But I also receive controlling factor, giving me the right to settle any arguments between everyone else. I was about 3 when this will be written, but my uncle said that there was something special about me and deemed I should get 50%. Sadly, there was nothing left because it was just used on my aunt's end-of-life care. To me, it wasn't the money. I could really care less. Just the fact that I barely knew my uncle, but he liked me so much he wrote me in like that, and that my aunt agreed with him and didn't touch his will. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and the comments. See you in the next video.